Thanks for tapping into Untapped Keg. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by the author of Last Call Stupid, Joshua Deen. How are you doing, Joshua? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing well. RJ, how are you?
I'm also doing well, just surviving the snowpocalypse in Virginia Beach. So
Right. Well, I guess it's better than massive fires.
that is, yes, that is not something that I will giggle about.
Yeah, I've known some people that have been affected. Fortunately for me, it's not been detrimental because I'm in Long Beach, but like when it was just fully blazing, it
Mhm.
looked like snow, that ash in the sky. Um, and I feel bad for a lot of people. So my heart goes out to my fellow Los Angeles or Angelinos, I should say.
It it's everybody, from across the country. It is something that you don't. There's so many transplants in that area that I feel like everybody is just like 2 degrees separated from somebody being affected by that or less. And
Oh,
so
for sure, for
I
sure.
hope everybody is able to find that community and get through it as best they can and find the resources that they're going to need to reach out to. So,
Yeah, it's been good. There's been a lot of the community effort has been pretty heartwarming, actually. So everybody's doing their job, pitching in. It's you know heartwarming,
yeah,
like I said.
that is something that is amazingly taken out of that. But Joshua, before we dive too deep into community and everything, if the listeners are just meeting you for the first time, could you give us a little bit of background in yourself?
Sure. Uh, Born and raised in Los Angeles. I been playing drums forever. I've been doing band stuff basically my whole life. I lived and partied like a broke, unfamous rock star for over 20 years. I, played all the places here, toured nationally and internationally, and drank a whole heap of booze in that 20-year period, 2021 year period. Um, and it was a pretty chaotic ride during that time. But that's a little bit about me. I have not had a drink for 5.5 years now. It'll be 6 years in June.
That's awesome. That is something to celebrate.
Thanks.
And on that note, so I do have a reason for asking you this, and I'll transition into it. But how do you find celebrating your time, making such a major life change? Like whether it is years, whether it is just giving yourself the grace that you're making such a huge change. How do you find the celebrating part of yourself?
Uh, that's a good question. I don't really I don't like birthdays. I don't like much putting myself in the spotlight, which is kind of ironic because like when I'm on the stage, that's my shit. I light up. But as far as birthdays and like celebrating me, it's kind of weird. Um, but I know the date is June 25th. Um, and I'm mindful of it. I'm getting better at giving myself a pat on the back. Um, and I've recently, like the last year, maybe last 2 years, I would go somewhere by myself, usually the ocean, and just trip out on how far I've come. Like even writing a freaking book, I would not have if you had told me 5.5 years ago I was going to write a book about me not drinking, I would have laughed in your face. So,
I feel that.
I yeah, I do sit and I do appreciate how far I've come. Um,
Mm.
and it's a nice day of reflection. It also happens to be my father's birthday too. That was coincidental, but so it's kind of a, you know,
Happy birthday, Dad.
yeah, double celebration.
Right?
I'm not a drunk
Um,
asshole anymore, Dad.
right. um, the reason I ask you that is because it's important to celebrate yourself, and I've had people I've been guiding people along this. However, I find myself as a similar style celebrator as you, where birthdays, like whatever, like putting myself, which is funny again, putting the spotlight on me
Right.
is not something that I love to do. And it's it's fun for me that you mentioned like the rock star in the spotlight like that, like because that's kind of what this is to me. But at the same time, like you catch me out anywhere and somebody just like starts to compliment me, like, listen, you can watch me melt away. Um,
Right.
and with that, like I got to 10 years, I was at 9.5 years. And my friend goes, hey, you keep telling people you're 9.5 years without drinking. What are you going to do for your 10th year? Because that's got to be coming up. I've heard you say it for a couple of months now that you're 9.5 years. And I'm like, yeah, it is about 3 months away. He's like, okay, what are you going to do? I'm like, it's just another day. Just,
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. And he goes, yeah, but 10 years is like, that's important. That's a milestone. You should take a moment to celebrate you. And it was really difficult. It took me all 3 of those months to build myself up to be like, this is something worth celebrating because it's something that I've done. Like, nobody can do it for you. You have to
Yeah.
do it for
Yeah.
yourself. And so I just realized in that moment how much celebrating like the smaller things and doing it in your way, in a way that you're comfortable with, so that you can step into it. Like, one of those things that helps me to learn to celebrate myself is accept compliments. Like, that's still not an
Yeah.
easy
Yeah.
feat, right? But getting to that celebration. So I just wanted to point out for everybody, like, celebrating yourself is something that you should do, but do it in that way that feels right for you and not necessarily a way that you feel that other people say you should do it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, and I was always my own worst critic, beating myself up all the time. And I've learned to just accept my love and treat myself like a friend,
Mm.
especially like with my inner dialogue too. Because it's so important to do that. Your self-talk and affirmations and everything that you have going on in your head when you're mindful of the negative self-talk, you just got to grab it and reconfigure what you're saying. Um, sometimes like by saying your own name, like Josh, stop doing that. Josh, celebrate yourself. So
Yeah.
um, I found actually, so when I first quit drinking, within a month, I bought myself a motorcycle to kind of solidify that because I was smart enough not to buy one before because I knew it'd get mangled or die. Um, and because my father rode, my grandfather rode, and I made a promise to myself if I ever start drinking again, I have to sell the bike. So I make it a thing to take a ride, even if it's, just a few miles. And I also made it to my dream destination. I live at the beach, which I thought was impossible for me to hit that. That was just such a goal that I thought was unreachable for me. And after I quit drinking, I was able to move down here within 2 years. So both of those things, like riding my Harley on the PCH, I could not have done that had I continued to drink. So that's my pat on the back to myself.
That's amazing. Like that, what a thing to be able to share. Like, I set this goal that felt like it was way too far out there, and then after I quit drinking I was able to hit it, right? And that's there's so many stories about that, and you get to know that you did that, and then to know that you're celebrating yourself in this way because you made this contract that you're with yourself, that you're living by. But something you mentioned there was yourself. critic, right? Your self-talk and how important that is. And that's something that I cannot agree with more, where when you take your awareness and you start to notice how you talk to yourself, how you can kind of turn that and guide it. It doesn't mean that you're always it doesn't mean that you're always allowing yourself to do things that you don't agree with, but it just means that instead of berating yourself, you're actually talking to yourself in a way that is kind and is a way that you can actually use those words to be the person that you would like to be.
Yeah, exactly. I just learned a little tip by a gentleman named Dan Harris. He was a journalist and he wrote
10%
10%
happier.
Happier. Yeah. And he's pretty heavy into Buddhism. And it actually turns out a lot of the intellectuals and philosophers like Sam Harris and some other people have been in the same vein, like agnostic, that type of mode growing up, but trying to find some semblance of like dare I say spirituality, if you're a skeptic. And Buddhism has really like struck a chord with just a feeling of connectedness and a little bit more of a like feeling more compassionate towards myself and others. Some of the disciplines, and of course, you don't have to buy the whole thing. You can take all the bits and pieces that you like and incorporate it into your own life. But some of the mantras and some of the things in Buddhism are super helpful. And he mentioned in one of his podcast episodes to call yourself by name. Especially if you're saying like you always do this, if you're talking to yourself, you always do this, or like, and that's especially bad because the you implies like an authoritarian thing, like you're always bad. And if that's kind of like a negative affirmation that's going on. And if you say your name, like Josh, knock it off, yeah, it cuts it right off because it kind of snaps you out of that spiral that you're going down, and it kind of wakes you up and okay, it makes you pay attention.
Mm. And that's something, that's a tool that people can use right away. Something else that has been really helpful for me comes from Brene Brown. And
Hmm.
with the self-talk, like really going, instead of saying like I am stupid, and this comes from her shame, like trying to break out of the shame cycle, instead of saying like I am stupid and identifying with that language, break it out to what it was that was stupid. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I can't believe that I dropped that bowl and broke it. Like, I'm so stupid. And
Right,
then
right,
like, but like being like, I can't believe that I dropped that bowl. That was so stupid, right? Just like changing the I am to a that was. All of a
right.
sudden, it just breaks it apart. Like, yeah, that wasn't the right action that I should have taken. Like, I should have taken steps to ensure that I wouldn't do that. But so instead of saying I'm stupid and like, that's kind of where it stops, saying that was, it's like now you can see the steps that you can break out so that that doesn't necessarily happen again.
Yeah, exactly. Or say like I'm so stupid. It's like, well, no, you might have done a stupid thing, but
Yes,
you
exactly.
as a whole component aren't stupid.
Oh, I have two kids, 7 and 5, and I've been working with my 7-year-old because he talks about himself, and I could tell he talks to himself a lot like the way that I do.
Mhm.
And I don't talk to myself out loud when he's around, but I could just tell that he's kind of somehow gotten that. And so I've been talking to him about he uses like I'm always doing the wrong thing. I'm always bad. I'm always, I can't do anything right, like things like that. And so just been working with them like, hey, you did this thing and it was the right thing. So you don't always do the bad thing. It's just this one time. And you didn't even do a bad thing. You just made a mistake because you're learning, right? And the other day, like this is even a year working on this kind of thing, like redirecting.
Mhm.
um he goes to me, I feel like I'm bad. I feel like I don't do things right. And I just in that moment, like I felt for him because
Mm,
I know what that's like. But in that moment, I was so proud of him. All I
right.
could focus on was the fact that he didn't say I am, I always, it was I feel this way. And I'm like,
Right,
that's
right.
such a win. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yes. Like, yes. I love it. And so like I I like made sure that I praised him and let him know, like, yes, this is talk about yourself, like this is such a great way. And thank you for telling me. And then, we talked about it and worked around it and it was like, you're learning. And so some of the consequences aren't going to be the consequences you like, but that's a part of learning is seeing what those consequences are and everything. And that was working with a child through their self-talk is really it's difficult and it takes a while. But also I'm glad that I'm working with him through that at the age of 7 rather than him having to work through it at the age of 35, 36, 37, or later
Right.
like his
Right, right.
dad. So
Yeah.
um with Joshua, like something that I'd love to hear that you took some like the Buddhism pieces that work for you and utilize it. And from reading your book, in our conversation that we had previously, like that's how you view making big life changes, like stopping drinking or other things. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Like how I came to stop drinking, or
Your philosophy behind the stopping drinking and how everybody's own path is unique. So make it unique for you.
right. Well, um, it wasn't premeditated. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't say I'm going to stop on such and such date or try to cut back. Um, it was kind of smacked into my face by a sidewalk. Um,
They come
it
out of
was,
nowhere.
yeah, yeah. So it was just one of those things. I was sick and tired to use a beat to death cliche.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had lost a couple relationships within, 3 years, and I was drinking to blackout every weekend. The last 3 years I drank. Um, and I was able to maintain during the work week. I was able to keep it to one drink, but Friday to Sunday was, just pounding, pounding drinks. Um, and I tripped. I smacked my face into a sidewalk buying my last two beers of the night on a Sunday, and the next, I was like, dude, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, I was stumbling drunk trying to get my last two beers, and I was aware of how stupid this was. And I just, I hit my face and my knee and all that. And the next day I was like, dude, I have to try to dry out for 30 days. That was my initial plan. Um, and after I got through the first weekend, I was pretty confident I wasn't going to go back. And then the following weekend after that was 4th of July, which was a little bit more intimidating because it was a holiday weekend, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's drinking time to celebrate good old USA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's one of those things like you create these monsters in your head, like, oh fuck, what am I gonna do? It's a long weekend, it's party time. And of course it showed up and it wasn't that big of a deal. So the imaginary monsters are more frightening than the literal ones. Um, and after I made it past that second weekend, I was like, dude, I'm not going back. I started to feel like $1 million. It was the first time I had been sober because I wasn't in jail by myself. Um, it was my decision. And so I I didn't use programs. I didn't use the steps, any of that. I had gone to a lot of meetings because I was forced to by the court because I racked up 4 DUIs in my tenure as a professional drinker. Um, And I mean, not being religious, of course, if you're not a religious person, it's kind of jarring, but also it just the philosophy behind it, like constantly ruminating over your problem. It doesn't, it seems like it keeps you kind of stuck in the past. Even the terminology casts a shadow over you, over where you are now. Like there's no way I'd call myself an alcoholic or in recovery, or I don't even like to use the word sober because it casts a shadow over my present. Um, I quit drinking and that's the end of the story. So what I did was I dove headfirst into self-help books, um, and YouTube videos, and I made sure that I was keeping busy because boredom was the number one killer for, like, when I got an itchy finger, like wanted to drink, it was always because I was bored. So I started waking up at 5 a.m. I had a strict exercise regimen. I picked up old and new hobbies. Like I did everything to keep busy. Idle hands are the devil's plaything. Um, and through that, that led me to more and more things. Once you start peeling the layers of that onion, it just it unravels to several different things, and then you start listening to podcasts. You find more people, and it just branches out until you're completely filling your head with positive, motivating things instead of I'm powerless. Like that's a hell of an affirmation to tell yourself. I mean, every positive affirmation is I am calm, I am abundant, I am grateful for what I have. So why would you throw in I am powerless over alcohol in your affirmation statement? It doesn't make any sense, and it's um I mean, not to harpoon AA, but it's it's just antiquated. It hasn't kept up with modern science and medical credibility whatsoever. Um, so it was a lot of it burying my head in like Stoicism, Buddhism, Taoism, self-help, exercise, hobbies, and that was it. Because I isolate. I never went to a group. I don't hang out with buddies that talk about sobriety. It's not a part of my identity. I quit drinking and that's it. I moved
Mm.
on. And that's what I explained in my book.
And it's so useful to know that that is a path that is available to people, right? Like, so I didn't use any program either. Like somebody asked me when I first stopped was like, "Oh, does that mean you're going to AA?" And I said, "No, I don't want any fucking homework. Are you kidding me? I've had enough homework in my life, right? Like I got all this shit going on. I don't need homework." And but like it does help people, and so that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
However, like you said about that big scary thing that it has, it feels fear-based. Like when I hear people talk about it, it's like but you don't have to necessarily stay there, or even if you don't want to go there, you don't have to, and you can get to an area where you're living your life how you want. And that's something that's a gift of when you recognize that something is getting in the way of you living your life. Okay, let's start doing that, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether it's porn, so many different things.
Yeah.
A lot of it is rooted in the fact, and let's be honest, like let's throw the good ones in there. There's work. There are people who go to the gym so much that it gets in the way of their life. When something gets in the way of your life, that's an unhealthy relationship with that thing. So what can you do to get it out from in front of you and start living your life how you want to live? And it's like, to me, like reading your book and then hearing you talk about it and hearing those words, that's what it seemed like to me, was like, oh, I'm starting to live my life how I want to live my life. And that's where the power is, when you start to choose that.
Yeah, exactly. Um, it does help a lot of people. It has helped a lot of people. although the success rate is under 10%. Um, it's it's largely um, an American program. 73% of it is in America because
Hmm.
other countries are different as far as like scientific medical methods and things like that and different ideologies. I found that was an interesting statistic that it's largely an American program. Um, but yeah, like you said, it doesn't seem the meetings that I went to, and I went to a lot, it didn't seem like a lot of the people wanted to move on, like just constantly ruminating and being stuck in these stories. Um, and also I get, if maybe I wasn't an alcoholic as far like because I've heard stories and met people that were way worse off than me, but I had a fucking problem. I went to jail a few times. I lost relationships, crashed cars. It was a giant thorn in my side, but I was able to walk away from it. So as far as like how bad I had it, or if you want to have a pissing contest about addiction and who drank more, who did what more, you know, it's that's not what I want to do. I
Yeah.
wanted to write my book. First off, share my story, like the ups and the downs, and make it an enjoyable read. But also, it's for people like myself. Like I'm 47. I quit, when I was 41. I wanted to address the people that just wanted to exit the party life and didn't feel like AA and rehab was the step they had to take. Like you don't have to admit you know that is causing problems if it's causing problems. You can't lie to
Yes.
yourself, So it's you. So if someone's having a hard time gripping or grappling with the fact that they can't drink anymore, I just wanted it to be known like you don't have to go the AA route or something so extreme, because it is stigmatizing, and
Hmm.
it's definitely not for everybody. So, and that's the tagline of the book is an exit strategy from toxic drinking culture. Um, it's because you can just move on. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to carry chips in your pocket if you don't want to,
Hmm.
Um, it's when when I reached my 40s and I was hungover, like morbidly hungover on Mondays, it's like, what the fuck am I doing? This is ridiculous. I'm not 20 anymore. The last tour I did, I felt like I aged 10 years and 5 weeks. And that's because I mean tour is that's a different ball game there. That's, you know, 4 weeks of being drunk. That's 20 beers minimum a day. That's just to not shake, to rattle the clothes off your body, you know? Um, and it gets old, and I see these people in the punk scene and the music scene that are still trying to go hard. And I feel like people grasp onto it like it's the last vestige of their youth. And it's almost like they don't want to let that part go because it's it's what they did and it's what I did. It's all I knew my entire adult life was partying, you know? And what do you do? How do you do that? You know? Admitting that you're fucking up and you need to cool it, that's the first thing. And you have to want to leave. And I got to the point where I don't fucking care what I lose anymore because I'm dying.
Hmm.
And it was just a suffocating, defeating feeling. Um, and I was just tired of it. So I quit.
That's such a visceral picture that you paint of that suffocating and defeating feeling. And that's something that when I look back at the last time that I drank, or even, that last year that I was drinking, it's like after every time I drank, it felt that, right? And
Yeah.
I can relate to that. But something that you mentioned there that just put some put some lights on in my brain was that moment of identifying with something external to us. So whether it be the partying, whether it be that I drink a lot, that whatever it is, and this can go on the other side with being sober, with alcohol still being a part of your identity in some way, shape, or form by not drinking it. And how now when it's time to make a change, I can't, because who am I outside of this, right? You have that
Right.
identity crisis. And what can I do with it? And then when something difficult happens, what do I do when something difficult happens? Well, I party. I drink. I go do this. So breaking that apart is so difficult. And it's only when you can admit that that is something that you're doing and you want to try something different that you can start to break those pieces apart and explore who you are without it, who you are actually on the inside, so that you can have a different answer when it comes to who you are, and don't identify with that thing that's external. Because if that thing is taken from you, now who are you? And this goes with like jobs. Like if you are
Yeah.
identifying with your job and you don't have that job anymore, what are you going to do? You're going to fall into a deep dark depression. You're going to fall into a deep hole of not knowing what your existence is for or where to go. And that's a lot of what you see when it comes to alcohol and it's time to stop. Or even on that other side of like, okay, I was a drinker and I was a drinker, and now you're going to still take your identity with, and it's around alcohol, but at this time it's that sobriety side, and you're
Mm.
so hard on that sobriety side that it's just teetering on that edge. But it's really the opposite sides of that same coin.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and I've met a lot of great people with the book
Mm,
and everything, but that gets hardcore too, like you said. Like now recovery's your identity, and you get
yes.
the fucking recovery bros. It's like fuck, I'm not that either, man. I just quit drinking.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny too because I mentioned this in the book, the identity thing. So no one everybody that you have ever met, including your parents, have a completely different perspective of your identity. You have a million different personas to every single person you have ever met has a different idea of who you are. So your identity, that's the like one of the first things you just have to fucking just shatter because your identity doesn't exist and you can change and be who you want to be at any point. I mean, as Alan Watts says, you are under no obligation to be the person you were 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it is 100% true. And I remember when I quit, I was like, fuck, what is everybody going to say? And nobody really cared. It
Yeah.
was like, it
Yes.
wasn't the big deal. Like, oh my God, you're not drinking. Like, what is happening? As I, oh, okay. And they've moved on with their life because no one's fucking thinking about you. You're so caught up thinking that everybody's sitting around, what's Josh doing? I bet, it's bullshit. No
That
one's thinking
motherfucker
about
isn't
you.
drinking anymore. Who does he think he
Yeah,
is?
like
Right? Like,
like toiling at night. Oh my God. This is unbearable. Um, but yeah, no one fucking cares, man. It's your identity is so it's self-imposed.
yes.
And I had that thing too in my 20s. I quit smoking. And I had an identity around that. Like I always had a cigarette case and a Zippo. Like I was the guy like quick draw McGraw with fucking tricks and all this fancy nonsense. Uh, but I hated smoking. I got to the point, and I actually needed help for. I got hypnosis to quit smoking. Um, and no one cared. It was like, oh, where's your Zippo, man? It's like, oh, I quit smoking. Okay, and they moved on with their day. it's not the big deal you think it's going to be. You just stop and move on. Your identity's made up.
Mm.
No one has the same idea of who you are. So just knock it off.
Well, and that's what I like to talk to people about, whether they be clients or like groups that I facilitate or things like that. It's like, yeah, you can hold yourself to who you think you were, or you can choose to be moving towards who you want to be, right? And that's only identity that matters is who you are today forward. Like
Yeah,
right now,
exactly.
who do you want to be, right? So start to be that person, whether it's just taking that one step and it's I'm not going to drink tonight, or I'm going to go for a walk tonight because I'm someone who walks, I'm someone who stays active, and you start that, and that is that is really all that matters in your life, and you start to realize that. But man, breaking down that identity, that it really is when you really start to do that, that's when you really, like we talked about earlier, start to choose to live life the way that you want to live.
Yeah, exactly. And realizing that you were in a prison with open doors. You were in this room that you thought was locked that you built yourself, but you could have walked out any single time you wanted to. Um, and from then on, and that's I think that's one of the AA mottos is just not today. It's just don't drink today. That's all you have to do. Um, and that is helpful. There are some gems to mine from the AA caverns. Um, but yeah, don't drink today. Like that's it. And then soon enough, you just don't even think about it. And you can create an ideal image of yourself. And once you have that in your head, it's like, okay, so what are the habits of that ideal self? And then start emulating that and just reverse engineer your life. Because healthy Josh exercises and wakes up at 5, so I'm going to incorporate those modalities and make it operational into my own existence.
And just that reverse engineering thing that you just talked about, that's something that a lot of people don't realize that you can do. Look at your goal, and you don't have to be your goal right now. Okay, how do I get to that? And when you bring it back to a place where you might be able to start, and you try it and you're like, oh, that's too far away. Okay, you didn't bring it back far enough. What's a start? What's something even smaller? And that, when you start to do that, now you start to find out who you really are
Yeah,
compared to who you thought you were supposed to be.
exactly. Oh,
Mm.
oh man, that's a whole other can of worms. 'Cause, I mean, since birth, you are just kind of being forced into a box through
Yeah.
school and then through, just trying to socialize yourself and then through work. And when you get to be an adult, you have to kind of unlearn the societal yeah, cookie mold that you've been pressed into and try to figure out, you know, you don't have to fit in. You don't have to do these things if you don't want to. You have
Ooh.
to find yourself, like you said. And that takes bravery, it takes courage, and it takes a lot. And I think for me too, a lot of that with drinking, I thought I was being my authentic self when I was drunk, but no, I was a grotesque, belligerent, like cartoon caricature of my real self when I drank. It wasn't fucking being honest or authentic. It was just being stupid because I didn't know who I was. And when you walk away from a habit, like for me, I drank from age 19 to 20 or 41. Um, those were some hardcore like developmental years, especially in my 20s, where I was drunk for. So having the courage to like figure yourself out too is scary when you're thinking about quitting drinking. Um, it's it's one of those things where you think you know yourself, but you kind of don't if you drank like I did, at least. So it's a rediscovery process.
Yes, it really is. And something that you said there too, that go pulling from another Brene Brown ism is, that act of fitting in. You think that you need to fit into all of these places. But the truth is, and if you're honest with yourself, it's not about the fitting in, it's figuring out where you belong. And the only way that you can figure out where you belong is to find out who you actually are. So
Yeah,
when you stop trying to fit in, now you can find where you actually should be. And it's like that process. And like you said, that's a really brave act to not to try to fit
yeah,
in, because that's what we're taught we're supposed to do, is try to fit in. And when you realize that what you've been craving and been told was that fitting in was the way to go, you've actually been craving that belonging, like
yeah.
that peace that you didn't even know. Like I heard somebody on, it was either a TikTok or it was a podcast, and somebody was saying, we always hear to be normal, like, or I want to be normal. Like most people when they're going through a process, they want to be normal. And they said, what if we replace the word normal? Because what the fuck does normal even mean? With natural. You
Yeah.
don't want what's normal. You want what's natural to yourself.
Or authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so that, because being authentic feels natural. And that's actually what we're looking for. And the natural feeling is that belonging, where you belong, and you don't have to fit in. You just get to be yourself. People
Yeah.
actually like that. Like that's a possibility, people. You get to be yourself and people actually like it.
What people crave authenticity. I mean, in a world,
Yes.
especially with social media, just a bunch of fucking, automatons trying to mimic everybody else. And if we had people, like if everybody did the status quo and adhered to the societal norms, we wouldn't have some of the best artists, scientists, doctors. These are groundbreaking people that said, no, fuck that. I'm going my own way. And those people changed the world. So, and that comes with authenticity, knowing, being honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself and you're honest to others, your life is going to be so much easier. It's remarkable when you implement that change, and you have to be fearless too, because some people aren't gonna like it, but fuck it. The people that like you are really, really, really gonna like you. You know, so that's what's up. I'd rather have a handful of good friends than a million people that don't give a fuck about me, really. You know what I mean? It's it's
Yes.
it's authenticity.
It's that, exactly what you said, that your life does feel easier when you're authentically you, because you're not trying to be anybody else. It takes a lot of energy to try to be somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
And it takes a lot less just to be yourself. Be goofy, be dorky, be weird. Like, as somebody who's been back in the dating scene for, a little bit over a year and a half, it's like, no, I want to let my inner dork come out. I want to show them my working proton pack. I want them to know that I don't drink. I want them to know all of this stuff because I want them to accept me. And
Yeah,
like, this is what you're getting into. I'm not going to keep the corny things away because I think the corny is fun, right? I think
yeah,
it's funny. And I'm bringing the dork. But like, you can do that with your friends. You can do that with your, honestly, you can go back and do it with your family. And if they say, well, this isn't the real you, the fuck you know about the real me? I've been playing this entire time, right? Like, be you.
exactly. And when you are you, there's no surprises later on. Like
Yes.
especially with dating and partners. It's like, no, this is who I am from day fucking one. There's not going to be any weird shit down the road. Like
Well, there might be weird
this.
shit, but it's going to
Well,
be mutually
correct. Yes.
agreed upon weird shit.
Consensual weirdness.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes. Uh, but
Oh,
yes, exactly. It's like Robert Greene too. I think in his book, well, he says it in a couple books, but maybe Mastery or Human Nature. Uh, but it's like lean into what makes you weird. Lean into your idiosyncrasies and the things that make you stick out because that's your superpower. Lean into it because you know everybody's just trying to be the same and have this facade and it's bullshit. And when you lean into what makes you you, you do become fearless once you start practicing that. And that was also on Charles Bukowski's grave. His tombstone reads, "Don't try." And what he meant by that was, don't try to be someone you're not. Like if you're writing, don't try to write to please the public. Or when I write songs, or my book for that matter, I wasn't trying to cast a wide net. I'm authentic and I want to say and write and sing what's in my heart. And when you do that, you can't go wrong. And I got to a place in my life where drinking was not a part of that anymore. So it was actually making me far from my authentic self when I thought it was, let me out of my cage, but that's not how it works.
mm, right. And that I like to I like to describe that like when I was drinking, I was looking at this beautiful painting of the horizon. And I thought that I was actually looking at the horizon, right? But then when I stopped, I actually turned around and I saw that real horizon. And I was like, oh shit, this is, I guess I should be looking at that real thing, right? And it's
Right.
just, it's those analogies and those things that, this really does, it unlocks a piece of yourself that you thought was previously, but you really, there was something holding you back. And that's the same thing with shedding the social norms, with embracing yourself and those things that you might struggle with. Like for forever, for a really long time, I didn't realize why I struggled with some things that other people found easy. And
Mhm.
then I found out that I have ADHD. And it's like, oh, that's why when the little things, when things are calm and normal, I struggle with those. But when shit hits the fan, I'm right on top of it. And I know things that, were said to me one time and it comes back like, oh, that's the pattern. That's something that a guy told me about in a story that he saw 15 years ago. And now I remember that story and that's what it's going to be. And save 6 hours of work or,
Right, right,
like a safety issue, figuring that out. Like that's why I can key into those things, but then the monotony I struggle with. It's like,
right.
oh, I can accept myself a lot more now because that's just how my brain works. It's not
Yeah,
like I'm trying to do that. It's just that's a part of how my brain works.
yeah,
And
exactly.
just that acceptance that can come from that is huge. It really is huge.
Yeah.
So, Josh, if you had something that you want people to be able to take away and be able to use in their life right now, what do you think would be the most important thing?
Well, just anybody or anybody looking to quit drinking or
Let's go with anybody. Let's throw it out there. And then we can go back to something more specific if you'd like.
uh mindfulness. The
Mm,
quality of your thoughts dictates your entire life. Um, a lot of the time, your thoughts are not your friend, and you can't stop it. They're insidious. Um, and that's the point of like meditation and stuff like that. But just being mindful of your thoughts towards yourself, thoughts towards other people, and how you can make things better because there's always a choice. If you're not reacting and you can sit with a knee-jerk emotion or a like knee-jerk reflex toward like being in traffic and fuck you and like if you can grab onto that before you do it, you realize you have a choice. and you can slow things down. Um, Mindfulness can change your life, and it's just slowing down a tiny little bit and realizing that there's always going to be a choice. Your initial thought isn't a choice, but you can grab it and then make it one from that. So it's not being reactionary and things that are out of your control, not ruminating on that because it's out of your control. There's, that's the big one of the big tenets of Stoicism and Buddhism too. But um, why why fight things or ruminate on things you can't control? Uh, that would be that would be my advice to anybody. Mindfulness.
I love that. And it's been really powerful in my journey too. And I'm really glad that you brought up like Stoicism and Buddhism and all of these different philosophies that when you look into it, honestly, you can include all the major religions in this too, the philosophical side of it. Like they all say the same thing, but with different stories, different
Yeah.
words, right? And when you notice that, it's like, oh, I can take this and I can apply it to my life in a way that makes sense to me. In
Hmm.
that mindfulness, you see that the choices that you make, the things that you have an impact on, are the way you're behaving, the way that you act. And so taking that time to put just a little bit of a wedge between the stimulus and the response
Yeah,
is
that's huge.
so powerful. So powerful. Whether it's I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now, so I'm triggered, and picking up that drink of alcohol, giving yourself 2 minutes to be like, do I really want to pick up this drink? Like, that's a start.
Yeah.
And just putting longer and longer time between that automatic response and that stimulus that happened. And that's how you get to a space of recognizing where you have control.
Yeah, absolutely. And that cushion, if you make things harder or, like you said, resist the urge, those initial pangs of uncomfortable, like fiendiness will subside fairly quickly if
Mm-hmm.
you just let it chill. Um, and that like it also I made things hard for myself. Like during the week, I would not keep alcohol in the house, things like that. Like I would keep it away. So I would buy my little half pint of vodka or a couple beers on the way home from work, but I wouldn't get anything else, which meant that if I wanted to get something else, I would have to go to the store, which I would bet on my laziness that wouldn't happen. So, and that's just one of those things. Putting putting the cushions there. Your thoughts though, when they arise, you have a choice because you can once you're conscious of it, you can catch it.
Mm. Question it. Question where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because it probably isn't coming from you. Like, don't know if you know this, but the thoughts in your head are probably from somebody else. Like, that is such a fact that is being like research is proving. Like all of these thoughts that you have, they're not actually necessarily yours. They're from society, from being, people outside of you. And so you start to name them like, oh, where'd that come from? Oh, my eighth grade basketball coach said that to me. Huh.
It-
Interesting.
100%, especially if if you look into determinism, and the lack of free will, that's a really interesting thread to pull on. I've been
Ooh.
reading a lot about that lately. It's kind of spooky how how much of us is just autopilot and just from birth the domino falls and you're kind of on this track and you are moved and influenced by society, like you said, like especially like body image and things like that, or racism, religion, all that shit you were taught. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be insidious. It's the part of when you grow up and deprogramming yourself. It's along those same lines. Because like you said, your thoughts, a lot of them they have been influenced by everything you've seen and heard your whole life, which is the bullshit on TV, mean kids at school, like all of that shit becomes your inner dialogue, and that's what you have to deconstruct.
Mm. And yes, this is like the really interesting part that could be a second episode that I'd love to dive into. But if people can just take that mindfulness aspect that you teed up so nicely and realize like, okay, and you start to use it in your life, like one thing that mindfulness can make space for is your emotions and feelings. There's so many people that are removed and unplugged from those that you don't even really know what they are. And if you start to learn what they are, you can really start to see the impact of other things in your life, such as, alcohol and how it's impacted you, or, work, or just other things that you didn't even realize were impacting you to the level that they were, like hobbies that you think you should continue, or, just other aspects of your life where you aren't showing up as yourself. You're showing up because you think you should. And that's not necessarily a place that you should be. So take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you can apply to drinking too. I mean,
Yes.
just the societal standard of expecting you to drink. Like that that paradigm should be fucking questioned. Like there's so many people like, "Oh, well, what do I do if someone asks why aren't I drinking?" Like tell them to go fuck themselves. You know? Like
Yeah.
don't it's so weird that these things are so prevalent. Like just the expectation to drink poison. Um, and I think a lot of that is in people's heads. Obviously, I mean, in some cultures and stuff, it's going to be different. And it is, families that drink. And I know people that are in other circumstances where it's harder to escape from. But it's just weird that it's kind of expected. Like that paradigm and that attitude needs to be turned. The whole opinion of it needs to be turned around. And I think it is starting to with the younger generation. Like I think a statistic I heard last year, pot was the more popular recreational pastime than alcohol. And fuck yeah, I would rather deal with someone, eating a gummy or smoking a bowl than someone drunk. You know what I mean? Any time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that the the attitude towards alcohol, especially from the younger generations, is shifting, which is great.
Mm.
There's hope. There's promise on the horizon, RJ.
There definitely is. There definitely is. And it is something that is exciting to see. Um, yeah. Josh, where can people find your book? And if people want to keep up with you, how can they best do that?
Yeah. Again, I am Joshua Deen. The book is Last Call Stupid. It is on Amazon, Kindle, paperback form. I am going to be recording the audio version fairly soon, I hope, and just trying to find a location to do that. And I am Joshua Deen official on Instagram and TikTok if it's still alive. Dean with two E's. And that's it. I um I hope I hope my book helps. And it's the things that I did to quit drinking, you could apply to anything. Anything that is pesky and has a boot on the back of your neck in your life. What I did to transcend alcohol, you could apply to most anything.
Mm. And that's a message that I hope people take away from this is it's not just one way that you can use things, but there's so many multiple ways you can add it to your life and try different things. And um, this has been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you for being here and having this conversation with me. Really appreciate it. And I hope people go out and they follow you.
Yeah, RJ, it's been a pleasure. This
Yeah.
was a very, very smooth conversation. Um,
Yes.
I didn't have to fight you about the steps or anything like that. So that was a good change of pace.
I'm not doing fucking homework. Listen. For those of you who really took something away from this episode, please share it with someone who you know would benefit from it. And thank you all for tapping in here. This is Untapped Keg. Let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today. Because we don't make it, we tried. Have a great week, everybody. I love you.